Hey, it's Kappy, and this is Beyond the Plate Heard, the audio newsletter where I share what's on my plate, literally and figuratively. From culinary insights to restaurants and recipes, it's everything that I'm seeing, tasting, and talking about in just a few minutes. This is not a peer-reviewed culinary journal. It's just my take on what I'm into at the moment. So let's dive in, and I hope you all take something from my plate. Okay, first up is Luther's Market and Noodle Shop. I'm really excited for this one personally. It's special to me because the people behind it are friends of mine and my wife and have been for many, many years. So Luther's is their new market and noodle shop in Charleston, South Carolina. And it's created by, as I said, our friends who happen to be a mother-son duo, Kiki and her son, Hudson. Kiki comes from a background in interior design. Needless to say, the space is going to look awesome. Kiki's done some food writing, and she also happens to be an incredible home cook. Now, Hudson, on the other hand, I always pin Hudson as an educator. He also is an incredibly talented artist, and he's just one of those genuinely kind, thoughtful humans who's always fun to be around. Now, when they told us they were leaving Chicago and heading to Charleston to bring Luther's to life, my wife and I were really excited to follow the journey. So one of my favorite things about Hudson is how he approaches food. He'll become fascinated with something as simple as a particular pasta shape, and then he'll spend hours researching its history, where it came from, why it's made the way it is, before even stepping into the kitchen to make it himself. I always pin him as this academic type, so it's not that surprising. But I love this because there's something really special about someone who's willing to understand the story behind an ingredient or a dish before they even try to master the craft. I could probably spend this whole episode talking about Kiki and Hudson, but what I'm really anxious to do is to get down to Charleston and see what they built. So Luther's began as a catering company and food truck, and now they've opened their first brick and mortar. They're serving global comfort food with a rotating menu of sandwiches, various handmade pastas, a lot of thoughtfully curated pantry items, and from everything I've seen, it all looks fantastic. They're also offering noodle making classes, which feels like a perfect excuse for a future Charleston trip with friends, or honestly, a pretty good bachelorette party activity. So congratulations to Kiki and Hudson on Luther's Market and Noodle Shop, and I cannot wait to visit. You can find all the links and handles I mentioned in the show notes. Next up, move over Sunday sauce because Saturday sauce from Sababa Foods is here. Saturday sauce is a tomato-based Middle Eastern starter sauce that was inspired by a family recipe from its founder, Amy Dell. I actually met Amy back in March at Expo West, the food show in Anaheim, and I was sitting on a bench outside waiting for the doors to open, and Amy walked up and sat on the bench with this perfectly organized, clear backpack featuring her jars of Sababa sauce. Naturally, I had to ask what the story was. So afterwards, she generously sent me some samples, and I recently cracked open the spicy version, and it was incredibly delicious. I actually just had a couple spoonfuls of the sauce straight from the jar before I even used it or did anything else. But what I wound up doing is creating a really quick side dish for our dinner the other night. So I mixed about half of the jar, or a little more, with a can of chickpeas and just cooked those over low heat until they warmed together. And it really made an easy and super flavorful side dish for a dinner. They also recommend using this sauce as a condiment or a dip, a spread. It's a simmer sauce, really, which I feel like I've been seeing more and more of these simmer or starter sauces. But it's one of those products that's easy to keep in your pantry or fridge because you can find all different types of ways to use it. So just a quick shout out to Amy for her hustle, for betting on a family recipe, and for creating a really delicious product. You can find all the links and handles I mentioned in the show notes. Next up is a recipe. It's for something I call gin radler. I don't even know if that's the official name, but it's what I've been calling it for years. I first learned about this drink from someone in the restaurant industry, and because it's so bright and refreshing, it's really become one of my favorite summertime cocktails. I don't usually share cocktail recipes here on Heard, but we're in the heart of the summer, so I figured why not? Someone else may enjoy a light, refreshing drink/beer cocktail as well. All right, so here's what you do. Super easy. Fill up a glass with ice. nice pint glass or something of that nature. Add about an ounce of gin and an ounce of Campari, and then top the rest of it off with Stiegl Grapefruit Radler, which is a beer if you're not familiar. If you're not a big gin fan, use half an ounce. And if Campari happens to be too bitter for you, you can cut that in half as well, or just swap it for Aperol, which is a little softer. And if you don't like either of them, just cut it out altogether. And that's it. It's really simple, super refreshing, little citrusy, little bitter, and really delicious on a hot summer day. Whether you are trying it or simply enjoy hearing about it here, this recipe is intended for those of legal drinking age, so please enjoy responsibly. Next up is the Green Bronx Machine and its founder, Stephen Ritz. Okay, Stephen Ritz is a force. I have crossed paths with him over the years at a handful of conferences and summits, most recently at a Google Food Conference, and before that at the Social Innovation Summit in Silicon Valley. And every time I hear him speak, I leave with this really energized feeling. So Stephen is a lifelong educator. He's from the South Bronx, and he believes students shouldn't have to leave their communities to create a better future. Instead, he's helping them build that future right where they are. So his organization is called the Green Bronx Machine. Stephen and his students have grown more than 365,000 pounds of fresh vegetables while improving academic performance, while creating pathways to careers, and while showing young people what's possible when education and food and community all come together. Now, it's not a surprise that his work has been recognized all over the world, quite frankly, but by organizations such as the Clinton Foundation, Google, TED Talk, Today Show, and on and on and on. But honestly, I think the real impact is not Stephen's recognition. It's the thousands of students and families whose lives have been changed because someone believed in them. Green Bronx Machine's mission is pretty simple: build healthier, more equitable, and more resilient communities through education, local food systems, and workforce development. I encourage you to spend a few minutes learning about what Stephen and his team are doing. It's one of those organizations that leaves you feeling pretty hopeful. You can find all the links and handles that I mentioned in the show notes. Next up is the Montana Knife Company. Okay, I was not very familiar with Montana Knife Company. Montana Knife Company is an American manufacturer crafting heirloom quality knives built for the outdoors, for the kitchen, and for everyday use. For my purposes, the kitchen. So a friend gave me one of their knives as an unexpected birthday gift, and honestly, it was an incredibly generous surprise. I have been using the knife more and more in the kitchen, and every time I do, I am reminded how nice it is to use a really well-made knife. It just feels good in your hand and makes the prep work and the cooking process that much more enjoyable. So that all led me down a rabbit hole of learning more about the company and its founder, Josh Smith. Check this out. Josh started making knives when he was 11 years old after a Little League baseball coach introduced him to bladesmithing. By 19 years old, he became the youngest master bladesmith in the world. He earned this title through years of craftsmanship and an incredibly demanding certification process. I just love stories like this when someone discovers a craft at a really young age and spends decades obsessing over it and eventually builds a company around doing one thing exceptionally well. I have a feeling this knife is going to be with me for an incredibly long time. You can find all the links and handles I mentioned in the show notes. One last thing before I leave you: solo dining. Okay, bear with me here. I have traveled a bunch for work over the last 20 years, and with that comes many solo dining adventures. Hundreds of them, quite frankly. Sometimes I sit at a bar, sometimes I sit at a table. Truth be told, I'm a fan of solo dining. I like the random interactions, maybe a bartender, a restaurant server, maybe even the chef coming out, or the person sitting next to you. Some have led to other restaurant recommendations, some business opportunities, and just some fun stories over the years. Anyhow, a few recent solo dining experiences got me thinking about a former boss of mine named Rodrigo Martinez, who owned a restaurant where I worked in Miami. Now, this was over 20-something years ago, well before everyone had a smartphone in their hand. You get what I'm saying? What Rodrigo would do, he would always pay special attention to guests that were dining alone. He understood that solo diners could sometimes feel overlooked, and he wanted them to feel cared for, part of the community or the restaurant family, quite frankly. And one of the ways that he did this was actually surprisingly simple. He kept a small collection of whatever the current magazine was at the time near the host stand and the bar. Could be a car magazine, a food magazine, a business magazine. You get the picture. If someone came in alone, there was always something available should they want it, whether they wanted it or not. It was the thought, right? I've never forgotten that. And looking back, it strikes me as such a thoughtful form of hospitality. Not because it was expensive or elaborate, but because it demonstrated awareness. The idea reminded me of a meal my wife and I had at a 3-star Michelin restaurant in San Sebastian, Spain, many years ago. During our dinner, we had asked our server where the staff liked to eat on their days off. And so by the end of the meal, the server returned with a piece of paper covered in recommendations from various team members. Each of them had written down their favorite local spots. I thought this was incredible. To me, that's hospitality at its best. It's anticipating someone's need or want or request. It's creating a connection with the guest, and it's sharing something meaningful. And perhaps that's the lesson here. The magazine was never really about the magazine. It was about making someone feel seen. Thanks for listening to Heard, a production of Beyond the Plate. You can find all the links and handles I mentioned in the show notes. If you liked this, tap the follow button and tune in for more Heard, where I share what I'm seeing, tasting, and loving lately in food and hospitality. And if your friends and family may enjoy it, I hope you will share it with them. Until next time.